something has shifted around Keith Urban. Not in a headline way, but in the more subtle, unsettling manner of someone who has always been steady, until they aren't. For years, Keith was the dependable presence in country music, polished, charming, and quietly resilient. Fans and friends watched him rise with a calm confidence that seemed almost engineered. But lately, the change is impossible to ignore. His behavior, his choices, even his sense of self, feels altered. It's not a spiral, but it is a transformation that has left those closest to him, and those watching from a distance, asking questions they never imagined they would. The truth behind his evolution is far heavier than anyone expected, because it didn't begin in 2025. It began decades earlier, in the earliest years of his life, before fame, and before the world learned his name. A boy and his ukulele, the first spark. Keith Urban's relationship with music began almost before he could speak. At 4 years old, his parents handed him a ukulele, a small instrument that would quietly shape the rest of his life. By 5, he had discovered the stage through a Johnny Cash concert, and the memory of that night became a defining vision. He wanted a life built around performance, no matter the cost. Growing up in Brisbane, he lived inside a home filled with sound. His father loved country music, and the guitar entered Keith's hands at 7. By 14, he was already performing in bars, talent shows, and anywhere that would let him stand under lights and play. At 15, he quit school, abandoning normal teenage life entirely. From the beginning, Keith was shaped by ambition, urgency, and a belief that music was the only path forward. Even if that path would eventually lead him through darkness he didn't yet understand. Early rejection, the seed of pressure. The first major setbacks arrived early, and they cut deep. At 9, he appeared on the Australian talent show Pot of Gold, only to be publicly criticized by Judge Barnard King, who dismissed country music as mediocrity. Keith clung to the one positive word the judge used, but the sting of rejection stayed with him. At 16, he tried again on New Faces, performing All Out of Love, yet again failing to win. Even then, the pressure of being good enough had already woven itself into his identity. By 1991, he released his first album in Australia, and by 1992, he left everything behind to move to Nashville. It was a gamble that would eventually make him a global star. But in those early years, Nashville wasn't the dream he imagined. He spent nights in a battered van with his band, The Ranch, playing for 3 people at a time, struggling with disappointment, isolation, and the harsh edges of an industry that wasn't interested in easing his way. The dark side of stardom, addiction arrives. The band dissolved after their 1997 album, but the real turning point came quietly. Nashville introduced him to cocaine. By the early 2000s, Keith Urban had become one of country music's most celebrated new voices, his albums climbing charts, and his songwriting maturing. Yet the truth was more complicated. While the world saw a charming, soft-spoken star, Keith was still wrestling with the remnants of a battle he'd never fully won. His first rehab stay in 1998 interrupted the cycle, but it didn't resolve the roots of addiction. Pressure, loneliness, and old insecurities carried from childhood into fame. The cracks resurfaced slowly. Then, everything shifted again in 2005 when he met Nicole Kidman at the Jade USA Gala in Los Angeles. Their connection was instant, effortless, and deeper than either expected. Together, they seemed unstoppable. But love doesn't erase addiction. It simply reveals it. Love, relapse, and the moment that changed everything. By June 2006, they were married in Sydney in a star-studded ceremony. For Keith, meeting Nicole felt like the beginning of a new life, one where he could finally outrun his past. But 4 months into their marriage, he relapsed. His drinking increased, cocaine re-entered his life, and the strain became impossible to hide. For someone who had always pretended to be fine, losing control in front of the person he loved most forced a brutal truth. He was not well, and he could not fix this alone. Nicole noticed the signs: subtle shifts, emotional distance, the familiar shades of someone slipping into dangerous territory. Instead of waiting for the crash, she intervened. Gathering a small circle of people Keith trusted, she staged an intervention with calm resolve. It wasn't anger. It was love delivered with urgency, a lifeline disguised as a boundary. Betty Ford. The rebuilding begins. Keith later admitted that Nicole's intervention was the moment he realized he was standing at the final crossroads he had always feared. He checked into the Betty Ford Center in October 2006, canceling media appearances and stepping away from the public eye. He spent months in treatment, emerging in January 2007 sober, humbled, and aware that survival required total honesty and commitment. Unlike his earlier attempts, this time sobriety didn't become a temporary pause in chaos. It became the organizing principle of his life, shaping his decisions, his relationships, and the kind of artist he would become. The transformation was quiet at first, then unmistakable. He began rebuilding not only his career but his identity. The new era, reinvention through music. After 2007, Keith Urban entered the longest and most disciplined chapter of his career. His post-rehab albums carried emotional weight, reflecting a man rebuilding from the inside out. Get Closer, 2010. Fuse, 2013. Ripcord, 2016. And Graffiti U, 2018. Each marked a different phase in his healing. He blended country with pop, rock, electronic influences, and unconventional rhythms, pushing boundaries many traditionalists never expected. Yet even as he reinvented his sound, his lyrics grew more personal, more reflective, tethered to the clarity sobriety had given him. He was no longer just a star. He was a man with scars, speaking honestly through his music. The cost of being watched. Fame as prison. Keith Urban's unraveling didn't happen in isolation. Fame had always been a double-edged sword, blessing and burden. But by 2025, the weight of constant visibility became harder to carry. The world followed his marriage, sobriety, career, and fatherhood. Every success was amplified, but so were the cracks. For someone who valued privacy as fiercely as Keith did, being watched began to feel like a prison. The turning point came years earlier, in 2013, when Nicole was knocked to the ground by a paparazzo on a New York sidewalk. The incident was captured and blasted across headlines within hours. Keith wasn't there, but he reacted with a rare, steady public plea for basic respect. His words revealed the toll of constant surveillance. After that, he became more guarded, quicker to cut off invasive questions, more protective of his private world. What comes next? The transformation continues. Even as he protected his family from external pressures, the internal ones mounted. His Las Vegas residency, massive tours, mentor roles, and non-stop creative output kept him in a constant cycle of performing and delivering. To the public, he appeared limitless, always upbeat, always polished. But maintaining that image required energy even he couldn't sustain. By 2025, the emotional tightness was unmistakable. Friends noted changes, withdrawal, flashes of impatience, abrupt decisions. The firing of longtime band members wasn't just managerial. It was a symptom of deeper unrest. Keith had spent decades rebuilding after addiction, keeping a marriage strong, raising children, and navigating a career of highs and lows. He became the picture of resilience. But resilience has limits. Stability has limits. Even healing has limits. and 2025 marked a turning point unlike any he had faced before. Outrow, the man the world thought they knew. Keith Urban's journey has always been shaped by transformation. But this new phase is complex, emotional, and still unfolding. The man the world thought they knew is still there, but he's no longer the same. Fans are watching closely to see what version of Keith emerges next. The calm mentor, the innovative artist, the devoted father, or a man finally learning to live for himself, without the need to perform. The biggest turning point in his story may not be his addiction, his marriage, or his fame. It may be the moment he realized that the life he built to survive was no longer enough to make him feel alive.